3 times in the history of life, nature assembled the same predator. Not the same animal, not the same lineage, not even the same method of breathing or the same body temperature. Just the same shape, forced by the same water, onto 3 entirely unrelated groups of vertebrates that shared nothing meaningful except the problem they were trying to solve. The problem is drag. Water is roughly 800 times denser than air. A body moving through it does not simply push the medium aside. The medium pushes back, harder the faster the body moves, and the geometry of what moves through it determines precisely how much resistance every centimeter of flesh must pay. Blunt leading edges pile fluid pressure at the front of a body. Wide midsections generate turbulent wakes that bleed forward momentum. Abrupt transitions from thick to narrow create vortices that steal kinetic energy at the exact moment an animal needs to sustain speed across open water. There is no evolving around this. Physics does not negotiate. The optimal profile for sustained high-speed movement through water is fusiform. Rounded at the front, widest at roughly a third of the total body length, then tapering smoothly to a narrow tail stalk where propulsive force transfers into forward motion. Engineers arrived at this shape after decades of fluid dynamics research and computational modeling. Evolution arrived at it repeatedly, independently, and without any of that. It did not need the theory. It simply eliminated every body that deviated too far from the solution until only the solution remained. Sharks found this shape first, at least among the lineages still alive. The shark lineage extends back more than 450 million years, predating the existence of trees on land, predating insects, predating the first 4-legged vertebrates by over 100 million years. The modern forms people recognize, the macos, the great whites, the hammerheads, are geologically recent within that long history. But the essential architecture, fusiform hull, crescent tail, narrow peduncle, has been refined across a timescale so vast that every human civilization combined represents a rounding error on its length. A short-fin mako accelerating through open ocean at more than 70 kilometers per hour is not a new design. It is the latest revision of a body the ocean has been editing since before vertebrates had jaws. Several lamnid species pushed convergence further than form alone. The great white, the mako, and the porbeagle each independently evolved the ability to retain metabolic heat in key tissues. Using a vascular countercurrent exchange network called the retem-mirabile, they keep their swimming muscles, brains, and eyes running significantly warmer than the surrounding water. Not warm-blooded in the mammalian sense, not regulated to a fixed internal temperature, but warm enough to sustain faster muscle contraction and sharper neural response in cold, deep water where ectothermic predators slow and dull. The ocean did not only demand a specific silhouette, it demanded a specific operating temperature in the tissues that mattered. Multiple unrelated shark lineages independently paid that cost. Then, roughly 250 million years ago, reptiles entered the ocean. Ichthyosaurs descended from terrestrial ancestors, 4-legged animals whose closest relatives paleontologists still dispute. The earliest known forms were transitional, elongated, and eel-like bodies caught between environments. But transition in geological time is brief. Within tens of millions of years, the architecture had shifted completely. The limbs had converted to rigid paddles. The spine had curved downward, supporting a crescent-shaped tail fluke. The snout had elongated into a hydrodynamic rostrum. The body had narrowed at precisely the same point, the peduncle, where a shark's body had already narrowed since before the ichthyosaurs' ancestors descended from land. In some species, the eyes expanded to diameters exceeding 20 centimeters, the largest recorded in any vertebrate fossil, shaped by the demands of hunting in deep, dim water. The ocean had specified a torpedo. The reptiles built one from scratch with no shared blueprint, no shared ancestry, no genetic record of what had already been constructed and why it had worked. Isotopic analysis and bone microstructure from ichthyosaur fossils suggest these animals may also have maintained body temperatures above ambient seawater. The evidence is not conclusive. Paleontology rarely yields certainty on physiology from preserved bone alone, but the signal appears consistently across multiple independent studies. If the interpretation holds, the ocean imposed the same internal thermal architecture it had already imposed on sharks, pushing a cold-blooded lineage toward warmth through the same fluid pressure that had already driven cold-blooded fish to retain heat. The starting material was different every time. The direction of pressure was always the same. Ichthyosaurs held open ocean for over 150 million years. They vanished in the late Cretaceous for reasons that remain debated. The sharks, as always, remained. They had been there before the ichthyosaurs appeared. They were still there after the ichthyosaurs were gone, and then the mammals walked into the sea. Around 50 million years ago, in shallow coastal environments along what is now South Asia, small terrestrial mammals began spending more time near and in the water. The earliest cetacean ancestors, animals like Pachycetus, had 4 functional legs and bodies shaped for ground movement. Nothing about them suggested what was coming. They were ungainly at the shoreline, hunting in shallows, looking nothing like anything that had preceded them in the ocean. But the same physics that had built every previous torpedo were already present in the water, waiting. The same drag penalties for the wrong body geometry. The same velocity reward for the correct one. Within roughly 20 million years, a span remarkable by human standards and unremarkable by evolutionary ones, the transformation was essentially complete. Hind limbs disappeared externally, forelimbs stiffened into pectoral flippers, the nostrils migrated up the skull and fused into a blowhole. The tail broadened into a horizontal fluke driven by vertical oscillation rather than the lateral sweep used by fish and ichthyosaurs, but arriving at the same crescent geometry that fluid dynamics had always required. A dorsal fin emerged from dense connective tissue without any bony support, performing exactly the stabilizing function the shark's dorsal fin had always performed. The body smoothed, narrowed at the peduncle, and became indistinguishable in silhouette from the torpedo 2 entirely separate lineages had already built before it arrived. The orca extends the mammalian torpedo further than any other dolphin. Technically a delphinid, the largest member of that family, it carries the streamlined body and endothermic physiology of its cetacean lineage and adds a cognitive architecture unique to mammals. Pod-specific communication dialects. Learned hunting strategies transmitted between individuals across generations. Cultural specializations in prey, some populations hunting salmon, others seals, others great white sharks. Researchers have documented orcas flipping sharks inverted to induce tonic immobility, then extracting specific organs with what field biologists describe as deliberate, methodical precision. The mammal that rebuilt the fish's body has in some circumstances made the original design, 450 million years in continuous refinement, into a food source. The pattern extends well beyond these 3 famous lineages. Bluefin tuna, bony fish from an evolutionary radiation entirely separate from sharks, independently arrived at the same fusiform profile, the same crescent tail, the same narrow peduncle. And like the lamnid sharks, bluefin tuna independently evolved regional endothermy through different vascular architecture, achieving the same thermal outcome in the same cold water environment. 400 million years of separate evolutionary history. The same warm body inside the same torpedo form. Jurassic marine crocodilians, the metrorhynchids, shed their heavy armor, developed smooth hydrodynamic skin, evolved paddle-shaped limbs, and grew a crescent-shaped fin at the tip of a downturned tail. They disappeared before reaching full convergence. The direction they were heading was never in doubt. This is what the pattern reveals. The ocean is not creative. It is a filter, extremely specific and entirely indifferent to the material it processes. When constraints are narrow enough and the physics are rigid enough, evolution does not diversify into a spectrum of solutions. It converges. It routes every lineage that enters the same problem toward the same answer regardless of what that lineage carried to the water's edge. Fish, reptile, mammal, scaled, furred, cold, warm, each time the input is different. Each time the output is the same. Biologists call this a functional attractor, a region of solution space that multiple unrelated systems are pulled toward when environmental pressure is strong, consistent, and non-negotiable. The torpedo body is the ocean's specification, written in fluid dynamics and forced across 500 million years without exception or appeal. Evolution does not remember building this shape before. It carries no archive and feels no familiarity. It does not recognize that it is repeating itself. It does not need to. The physics have not changed in 500 million years. Water is still dense, prey is still fast. Drag still penalizes every body that is not smooth and tapered and narrow where thrust meets water. And every time a new lineage enters the open ocean carrying a body that has not yet solved that equation, the same forces begin working on it, patiently, across millions of years, pressing the wrong geometries out and leaving only the one the medium permits. Not because evolution chose the torpedo again,